franchising, franchise success, winning at franchising always comes down to the fundamentals. And today we're going to speak with Holly Katko of Uconnect Solutions to dive into some fundamentals of franchising, franchise success. We're going to start with the operations manual, leadership, and discuss a framework to introduce culture, core values, and SWOT analysis into improving the bottom line of your franchisees. Holly, thanks for doing this. We have some important topics here. We're focused on winning at franchising. There's so many franchise brands out there. They're going in all directions, whether they're franchising their business or a current franchisor. People are giving advice, but today let's build some foundational elements. I know what you're passionate about. And if I could tee this up, so 3 framework items for our audience out there that I want you to think about. It's going to help you win at franchising. 1, a framework for understanding the importance of your operations manual in connection with your franchise agreement and your FDD, something you need to keep track of at all times. The second is leadership and culture, and not just buzzwords. Holly's going to talk about SMART goals and how we could help translate our culture into outbound KPIs, which ultimately are things like average unit volume, system-wide sales. So let's create this framework for these fundamentals. Holly, I appreciate it. And I think, what struck me is, a lot of people pay lip service to operations manuals. I'm sometimes guilty of not clearly communicating, but for franchisors out there, I know you're very focused to a point of precision on consistency, and share ops manuals and that underpinnings for franchisors.
Right. Yes, it is so critical, Charles. What I find is that a lot of times I'll see a franchisor that will come to me after they've had their FDD and their FA. They're in the process of trying to finish their FDD, and they're like, Holly, all I need are those topics that we need to put in here. All I need is that great table of contents. It's like, I think you need more than a table of contents here. So my job is to really help them with that.
But Holly, and to your point, you're very focused on what I think what your franchise agreement says, what your FDD says, what your franchise ops manual says. And also, I love your focus when you talk about, when you're reviewing the ops manual, that franchisors need to focus on what they promise franchisees. So if you could walk us through that a little more.
That's exactly right, Charles. It's very important that when I build out an operations manual, what I do is I take that FDD and I take the FA, and I make sure that those promises that franchisor has made to the franchisee are right there in that operations manual. Because what happens? You sign a FDD and FA, and off it goes into a closet somewhere. Well, when you really look at this, that document is what makes your operation come together as a franchise. So it's very important that we take and we build that operations manual based upon those promises that have been made to the franchisee. Well, and also the franchisee has made some promises as well, and those need to be in that operations manual too. You're looking at probably the first 100 pages of that operations manual being policies that are built on the FDD and the FA. And then, the next couple 100 pages are more operations. So you might think, well, my operations manual is only 30 pages. Not if you really want that document to be something that's going to help you legally with that franchisee. So it's very important that we be consistent. And then my recommendation is always, after you have built your operations manual, that you make sure that your franchise attorney, that Charles, looks at that operations manual before it goes out the door.
When I speak with clients and new franchisors, I always advise them, look, your operations manual, critical, but you also need to view it as a version 1.0 of the document. It needs to be living. And what are some of the best practices you share with franchisors in terms of the mindset they should have toward how that ops manual should evolve over time number one. And the second, how they could better implement and use it in their franchise system throughout the life cycle of it.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Yes. That, and that's what, back in the day, what would you get? I mean, you get like a 300-page document. It's like, okay, I'm going to read this. Absolutely not. Right. So my recommendation when it comes to an operations manual is that you actually take it and you put it in a LMS, put it in a learning management system. But that then goes into a portal so that then only those people, only those franchisees have the ability to go into that portal and look at it. Also, what that does for you is it protects that document, because that is your lifeblood. If anybody gets a hold of that, that is how your company is run. So my recommendation is that you get that operations manual online. But again, it's not just one huge document. Now, when you have it online, you're actually able to section it off into those sections, so that then, you have, let's say it's a restaurant and a server needs to know how to serve. Then that section is pulled out and it is utilized in an online training program. Now, also what that does for you is it saves you time as a franchisor in training. Also, it helps with that consistency of the language for each one of those people that are on staff. So hugely important that you get things online. And I don't care if you're just starting out as a franchise. It's very important to utilize those tools up front. It will save you hours and your team hours on training. And you can utilize it in your franchisee training as well.
Which is, it's a critical point. And Holly used the term LMS. It's a learning management system. Really, all these cloud-based systems out there where you could upload your videos and quizzes and information. So the point and takeaway here is, number one, focus on your ops manual in a real holistic way. First, evaluate what you've promised your franchisees and make sure you're covering that in the ops manual. Develop it in a way that it's going to become a working tool, a living document. Ultimately, you could put on a cloud-based system, amplify, create more access to it. And to Holly's point, make sure it's consistent with your franchise agreements, your FDD, how you're speaking with your team members and what you're communicating to franchisees. Right. I think that's critical. For me, a big takeaway here is I appreciate your precision when you're focused on it. I think franchisors, you'll get value out of really taking that precise approach to the ops manual and how everything integrates. Holly, this all connects. You speak frequently about consistency.
Right.
And we could see how that interrelates with the operations manual, which then gets to the other point. You're frequently discuss leadership, team leadership, franchisor leadership, leading franchisees, and culture. And as a business owner myself, we all struggle with culture. The one thing I've learned in time with age is that culture is probably the most powerful asset of a business, right? When I look at our SWOT analysis, and as a firm, I know culture is that driving force, those guardrails. So the hard part is, years ago, I'd be like, well, let me just grow a little and build our business, and I'll focus on culture along the way. And you don't realize that culture is what creates an amazing organization. So from a franchisor perspective, someone who's franchising their business, and also an emerging brand from 0 to 100 units, how do you communicate to them the importance of culture? How do you work with them? What's your focus? And ultimately, I'm going to ask you, what are takeaways, things that our viewers could start implementing right away or thinking about?
Very good point. Yes. Culture. Keep in mind that the franchisee has or is going to purchase your brand. And your brand is your culture. So it's very important that you're able to very clearly explain to that franchisee what the culture is. Just like you had mentioned, Charles, you had mentioned SWOTs, and that is really measuring the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, and the threats that you as a franchisor have, but also that the franchisee has, as well as the employees. So it goes all the way to the level of the employees. Understanding each one of those individuals' SWOTs allow you to actually utilize one person's strengths to shore up the weaknesses of the other. So utilizing SWOTs is the first key point to being able to measure culture. So what are those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats? And then utilizing that piece as you're building out your SMART goals. So what specific tools do you have in your toolbox to actually build out your culture? And then from that, we're building SMART goals, right? So specific, what are those specific tools that you're going to use? And what is it that you want your culture to look like? What do you like about your culture now? And what don't you like? Another kind of key point when we talk about culture is to understand that when you hire new hires, or maybe it's somebody that's been in the system for a long time and you're doing some changes, you're going to always run into people are going to be excited about the brand. They're going to be excited about the new job. That's what's called forming a team. Now, after you've started to form your team and you want to make sure that everybody on the team understands that they're going to go through this process, next comes storming. So you're forming the team, everybody's so excited. Now all of a sudden they start to see friction because one person doesn't get along with the other because they're different personalities, right? So then you go through a storming stage and then you stay in storming as long as the management allows it. And then from there, your team starts to normalize, and then finally you are performing. So those 4 pieces are very important to look at as you're actually utilizing your culture and looking at how do you get into that performing section sooner rather than later. But then use your SMART goals along the way.
I love this. And I'm going to go back a little just as a business owner, because number one, the SWOT analysis, and again, connecting the dots, and I didn't
Yes.
initially. I love your focus, all right? Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats. And, naturally, if I'm a franchisor, which I was at one point, I'm thinking, okay, what is our brand SWOT? Or as a franchisor, but I love your advice, which is, it sounds little, but it's a paradigm shift, at least mentally, which is you need to conduct your SWOT analysis at the brand level, at the franchisee level, and at the employee level.
Yes.
I think that's so critical. That's something I feel like so many overlook. And your connections in terms of, hey, a strength at the brand level, the franchisor level, may help support a weakness of the franchisee. And I think that's a great exercise for franchisors. If you do the SWOT analysis on the franchisor level, franchisee, and employee, well, then part of your opportunity is to build up strength to bolster franchisee weaknesses, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool.
You're exactly right. As you look at the franchisor and you look at the organization itself, so now you're talking about the franchisor, you're talking about the company itself. So what are the company's strengths? So are those, what are the strengths? What are the things that you have that make you stand out as a brand? So, is it the size? Is it your depth in a particular community or maybe across the nation, whatever it might be? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What are your competitors doing that is different than what you are doing? So SWOTs for the company itself are critical before you actually franchise, because that franchisee is going to come at you and say, hey, you know what? Yeah, I see that you're really strong here, but you're really weak over on this side. And then look at how you can take that weakness, though, and make it into a strength. What can you be doing differently to actually make that brand stronger? But the identification of those strengths and weaknesses are critical. Then threats, as you look at your threats, are they truly threats? And is that threat actually this great opportunity? I mean, how many people looked at COVID, right? I know this is, we talk about it all the time, but a lot of people looked at COVID as, this is a huge threat. But how many people also took that threat and looked at how they could make it into an opportunity?
Holly, we have our SWOT analysis. we broadened it out. We broadened it out. So we're at the brand, franchisee, employee level, which makes so much sense. Where, how do you, when we were speaking earlier, how are you connecting SWOT analysis with culture?
Right. So the culture begins with the SWOT analysis. And the reason why is because if you don't understand your people and your company first, then you really can't build out that culture. And culture, again, nothing in culture happens in what I call a silo. You need to always incorporate your whole team as you build out that SWOT analysis on every individual of the team. The more team involvement that you get, the stronger that culture begins. So don't assume you know what someone else is thinking. You truly understand what is happening with that individual to help to, culture, you think, oh, it's something that I just can't get a hold of. You definitely can, but you have to understand your people first. You can't just plug and play a person. You need to fully understand what they are about and then build, take that job. Maybe that's not the right job for them. You put them in sales and they have no interest in sales. So you have to know where they need to be in that organization. Once you understand the SWOT, once you understand where they're at, then you can start to build out goals based upon their SWOT, right? So company goals then come into, we start with the company, build it into the culture, and build it into each one of those individuals, which then flows right into your KPIs. So what are your goals a year from now, 5 years from now? Back into it, and then understand how those goals then relate to your KPIs.
Holly, when I love how you put SWOT analysis at the core of culture, or at least evaluating culture and building culture. I never thought of it that way, but when I think about even just following traction, how we start off with our 5-year goals, we go through our SWOT analysis, and it does permeate where we're focused, which then leads to culture. What I also like is how you're connecting culture to tangible, real world KPIs, right? So for a franchisor, franchise system, a key KPI is system-wide sales, franchisee sales. We want them to succeed. In fact, the growth of a franchise system is more dependent on franchisee sales growth than really just new franchise sales. So if one KPI, because I like your thought process. So when you're building SMART goals in relation to culture, if one of the outbound or macro goals is improve sales, you sort of reverse engineer that back into culture.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, you're exactly right. It is reverse engineering, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're working with a brand, what are like some of the experiences or takeaways when you go through that analysis and you're discussing culture and team, that when you're working with your clients, they give you a look like, I didn't expect that, or I always knew that, but never implemented that. What are some of those moments?
Very good point. Yeah, it is interesting because most franchisees and franchisors really want to just go head first. It's like Holly, stop. This isn't this isn't where we want it to go. We just want it done. It's like, well, you can't just do it without taking these steps first. So it is truly the understanding of your people, the understanding of your culture, and that operations manual. I mean, the reason why I've got a company I'm working with right now. They've been in business for 10 years. They have nothing in writing. And now they say, we want this in writing. And it's like, okay. And the question becomes, why wasn't it done before? So that, their culture, it's like, just get it done. But look at how much more you would achieve if you actually had it all written down consistently, so you don't have those mistakes happen. And that then becomes the culture. So that's the conversation that goes around someone who's starting the company, and they say, well, I don't want to go this slow. It's like, well, we got to chunk it. But then that is also the beauty of a SMART goal, right? That means timely. So by setting out the actual project timelines and everyone working together, I don't build this for you. What I do is I bring these ideas to you. We work together as a team, and then we bring in the rest of the team so that then we have project timelines that we all work consistently. And then you know that there's an end game. You know that there's going to be an end to this. And it's okay. It's okay to go through these pieces, because then that weight will come off your shoulders once you understand the inner workings of your own company.
Yeah, as part of my notes is, again, where you keep pulling back to, which is powerful, is um, I believe you used the phrase, it's truly the understanding of your people.
Mm,
And I think when people use buzzwords and here's our core values and here's what we stand for, but you see it doesn't connect with anyone.
right.
They're just going through they're playing executive and they're going through the motions. And I've sat in many board meetings where I've seen that. I believe the genesis or the problem is it's really not connecting with the people on the team.
Yes.
And that's powerful. As I'm sitting here, I'm reflecting on my own journey and thinking about our team. And I can tell you during our next meeting, I'm going to approach it differently and view it differently. Holly, it's what I love about this conversation is these are all the little things that people think they could overlook and then catch up on later on.
Right.
And some brands that don't succeed or businesses that don't succeed, they think it's a big macro issue or reason why, but it's these little things, they're not connecting the dots. Yeah, look, I'm always amazed. We have these conversations. I love these podcasts, and then I'm like, I think I know where the conversation's going, and I just leave inspired. And Holly, I appreciate, and Holly's a great person to speak and work with. She really, I would call her a coach and management advisor in many ways. So I appreciate the time today, Holly.
Yes. Thank you, Charles. I appreciate it too.